ELO, really the fundamental financial powerhouse of the moon's exploration and development, has been in existence, I will say, for quite some time, nearly a century at this point. Uh, Roughly around, I believe, 2020, and then progressing up towards 2040. The ELO was mostly a private organization that dealt with the development and exploration of space as a resource for a world that was very much grappling with environmental disasters and energy scarcity, as well as various environmental crises, such as the lack of drinkable water, the different biological agents that were being released into the wind and waterways, and all sorts and manner of hazard, natural and man-made, that were making the Earth rather hostile towards the species that is humanity. The Yellow's main goal primarily was to find solutions for that in space where they could, whether that was through energy management and production or through medical research that can be conducted in a zero or low G environment. Um, Not too dissimilar from what you might find with some of the work that NASA has done. However, they were a private entity who was contracted by various governments around the world. As they progressed and became more powerful, more influential, and more well established as one of the world's foremost space exploration organizations, they also started to get a very strange sort of, I'll say, bug in their system, as it were, because the ELO had a lot of rich people who were very invested in their corporate structure. Now, we see this sort of in the real world with things like Tesla, for example, and how they want to explore and colonize Mars eventually. But the joke on the back end of that is that there is this sort of understanding that most of us have as commoners that colonization of Mars is going to be something for the very influential and the very wealthy. And so it really won't matter to some of these people how much they screw up the planet because they'll have their little escape hatch. Now, that's more of a political commentary on my part than anything, but there is that sneaking suspicion, of course, that people who have that money, that wealth, and that influence, who have the means and certainly the motivation to try and escape a dying world or extend their own lifespan would probably spend their fortunes doing so. And that's exactly what happened with the foundation and creation of ultimate rise of ELO, is that they showed such promise in their initial sort of development. You had a lot of very wealthy, powerful people, uh, private citizens almost entirely, but still some government officials as well. Those who may be a little less scrupulous than they should would all be heavily invested in the ELO. And once the ELO finally did establish colonies on the moon, what they brought with them were the shareholders. The shareholders being a very strange and almost undead network of minds preserved within layers and wires, wrapped network meshes of neural interfacing diodes, pads, gels, suspended in tanks. Some of them not even composed entirely of a brain anymore, but instead a sort of odd Frankenstein esque construct or cage of cybernetic interfaces. These are people who still exist. In all technical terms, they are alive. But by any definition, including all but the least ethical, these are zombies for the most part. They have no bodies, those shareholders. There's roughly over 100 of them. The number could be somewhere around 120. But it's between 120 and 150. Some of the mines can fade off and just disappear from the network. Other mines will just come back online after being thought to be completely missing and go back to contributing, reconnecting with the other mines in the network. The entire construct itself is a massive cylindrical tank existing far below the basement of the ELO mega tower known as Babel. Babylon, the tower at which the top of which, or nearly at the top, Jeff Lynne and the other well-known public executives, that's where they do their work. But deep, deep down below, in the figurative underworld of that tower, exists shareholders. And the shareholders, once they came to the moon and were installed and placed, did everything they could to try and extend their lives, to use their money and their influence to try and make a perfect society in which they would be beautiful and immortal forever, always having entertainment, always being served, never ever being obsolete, always able to upgrade, always able to take on new challenges. These are the executives that want to be God, or they were at the very least, before they just became brains. You all are what we would call middle management, shadow managers. At one point, it's likely Million Wilson started out in this sort of position, although Million had a bright future being sort of built to be what you would know to be sort of at the top, a shadow executive. As a middle manager, it's likely that you've never been outside of your tank, and it's likely that you have really never interacted or rarely interacted with anyone outside of this network. It is a network of both old preserved minds and artificial intelligences that are meant specifically to educate, refine, and hone the skills of those corporate drones that dwell within those tanks, which you are inside one as we speak. Before we actually get started, however, every middle manager has a talent and a focus. They have something that they are good at, and there is never, ever, ever a corporate employee who has nothing to offer. Even if that thing is taking up space, they take up space very well in some way, whether it's just throwing up red tape somewhere to stop a merger or halt some sort of transaction, to cause the government to bumble and stumble and trip over them because they are just the bump in the road. Everyone has a purpose in the corporate hierarchy. And if you don't want to do your job, somebody else will. And you'll be doing your job some other way, likely providing nutrients to the other corporate drones.
Oh, good.
Ooh.
With that in mind, consider what it is that your middle manager specializes in.